From the nation's capital, this is The View from Washington with Congressman Buck McKeon. Your host, Congressman Buck McKeon.
Hi, I'm Congressman Buck McKeon from the 25th District of California, and I'm the senior Republican on the U.S. House Education and Labor Committee. Welcome to The View from Washington, a program that I'll be hosting throughout the year to keep you up to date on important issues before Congress. It's a distinct honor for me to welcome our very first guest this year, U.S. Secretary of Education Margaret Spellings. She and I will be discussing a matter of significant importance, kindergarten through 12th grade education. January 8th marked the 6th anniversary of the historic No Child Left Behind Act, otherwise known as NCLB, a law which commits our schools to bringing all students up to grade level or better in reading and math by 2014. Today we will be discussing the law's pending reauthorization. The Secretary can offer us her insight on how the law can be fine-tuned and what we expect to see as we head into 2008. During Secretary Spellings' term as the Secretary of Education, she has partnered with states to implement and enforce the No Child Left Behind Act and has been a leader in reforms to make education more innovative and responsive. She is working to ensure that every young American has the knowledge and skills to succeed in the 21st century. As the first mother of school-aged children to serve as Education Secretary, she has a special appreciation for the hopes and concerns of American families. Secretary Spellings, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Congressman.
How about if you start out maybe telling us a little bit about the history? I know you were with President Bush in Texas and right with the start of No Child Left Behind, if you could kind of tell us what the purpose is and how we got where we are.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, No Child Left Behind and the core principles that underpin it really started in the States. It was an idea that said we're going to hold ourselves accountable for the achievement of every kid. We're going to do that by testing every year and disaggregating that data, which means that we're going to hold ourselves accountable for every student and every group of students. And we're going to do that so that we can represent taxpayer interests. You know, we tried for 40 years at the federal level, putting the money out and hoping for the best. And we had a flat achievement line. And now, 6 years into No Child Left Behind, we're seeing the tide turn. We're going in the right direction, and things are improving in American public education. But it was actually rooted in the states. It passed here 6 years ago with strong bipartisan support, overwhelming margins, because we all know that if we don't tackle issues of education in our country, we will not continue to be the world's innovator and leader. We won't be the world's greatest civic democracy. Really, all of that is rooted in our education system.
You know, I've found in traveling around the country and visiting with people, some people don't understand. They think that No Child Left Behind was just kind of created out of whole cloth. Mm-hmm. But actually, the federal government began involvement in local K-12 education in 1965 with the Elementary Secondary Education Act. And this was a reauthorization. But as you said, in those 40 years, we had spent about $85 billion at the state from the federal government without any change in the gap between the Hispanic and the Black American, African American kids, and that was the whole purpose. So what you had learned with the president in Texas was that all kids could learn. We just had to give them the opportunity, and we're tired of giving kids diplomas they can't read and moving them through the process. So
absolutely,
this was a good thing, and it is working. It has been working. I found, I'm sure you've visited with people all around the country, educators at all levels, and they're for the most part, they agree that it's working, but there's some things that need to be fixed. How do you see the upcoming reauthorization? What can we do to make that better, make it happen?
Sure, I recognize that, and someone as senior as you in the Congress knows that the reason that we have reauthorizations in Washington is so that we can fix things, learn from experience, and make the law better going forward. And we recognize absolutely there are some things that we can do better. And let me take this opportunity, Congressman, to commend you and your stalwart support and leadership on this law, as well as on higher education. Maybe I could come back and we'll talk about that. You've been such a leader there. But, I think the things that we hear on the road really are very, very similar. We hear that states and schools want to have a better way to keep up with student progress. They want what's known in the trade as a growth model, the ability to track a group of students from year to year through their schooling. That's legitimate. That's righteous. The reason we didn't enact that 6 years ago is because we had so few accountability systems, so few annual and measurement systems that could really support that philosophy. But now, 6 years into it, we can do that kind of more sophisticated work, and we should. And I think there's broad agreement in the Congress about that. We can also make this accountability system that essentially is a pass-fail system, if you will, that says either schools do or don't make No Child Left Behind targets, and we can have more nuance across that accountability spectrum now. Really focus more intently on our chronic underperformers and give attention to those schools that are just very much within range. Let them move forward, but let's really concentrate on the raging fire, which are our chronically failing schools. One thing I do want to take the opportunity to say is that, there are about 100,000 schools in our country, and about 70% of them do meet No Child Left Behind targets. And there are only about 3,300 schools that are in this chronic 5 or more years of being labeled as failing schools. Now, when we're getting half of our minority kids out of high school on time in a state like yours, California, and mine like Texas, it doesn't strike me that 3,300 schools is, vastly overstated. And I think, one of the things that we can all do together, and that's why I'm so pleased to be on this show, is really tell our citizens and tell educators that really, the accountability system is maybe even less vigorous than it might be, because 3,300 schools being labeled out of 100,000 when half of our kids are dropping out, half of our minority kids are dropping out, doesn't seem wildly overstated to me.
The point I made in the introduction, that you're the first mother with school-aged children, and so you really have an interest in this and an understanding, because you've worked with your children as they're going through school, and you see the problems there. I have 6 children and 29 grandchildren, and it's very important to give all of these kids. My kids are kind of spread over several states, so we kind of see education at an upfront, close level through several different states. And a lot of people, we took some flack when No Child Left Behind was passed. People didn't like the accountability part. Nobody likes to be held accountable for things, I guess. But it's important, and people understand now that it is working. But in the implementation, each state implements, they set their own standards. Maybe some people don't understand that, how the federal government got a lot of blame for the implementation. Some people put a lot more on No Child Left Behind, some people not as much, depends, but it was the states that implemented it. All we required was that they be able to learn to read and know basic math. We thought that was as little as you could ask, and we should do that.